For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and glorified him, and so your faith and hope are in God. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. For you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring word of God. For all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this is the word that was preached to you.
In today's reflection, the Apostle Peter speaks to us about what is most important in our faith, God's grace, which we can receive only through Christ. Here are the words recorded at the beginning of the passage under consideration. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Peter reminds us that salvation is not the result of our merits, wealth, or human efforts. We are redeemed by the precious blood of Christ. He is the Lamb who gave his life so that we might live. This truth is the foundation of our faith. Without Christ, our faith would be just a collection of empty rituals and traditions with no power to transform life. Sometimes I think that today's world does everything it can to mix good values with bad ones in such a way that we lose our bearings. Screenwriters write about likable serial killers, and TV directors add a funny thief, both often escaping justice. Meanwhile, the press or politicians flood us with alternative truths about the reality around us. We absorb these colorful and deceptive messages, and they infiltrate our minds and consciences. Perhaps that is why some find it difficult to distinguish between good and evil today, the value of the gospel from modern philosophical rubbish. However, Peter reminds us that true value comes from God and has been given to us through Christ. We are no longer slaves to sin and death, but free children of God because we have been redeemed by his blood. Let's now look at the second part of this passage. Here is the quote: "Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. For you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring word of God." Peter calls us to nurture brotherly love that flows from a pure heart. This love is not an emotion or a street transaction. It is a love born of obedience to the truth, from our devotion to Christ and his teachings. We are reborn through the Word of God, which is alive and enduring. This Word has the power to transform us and our lives. In a world that seems to have lost its conscience, and where the word love is often abused and loses its color, true brotherly love becomes a manifestation of defiance. We are called to love one another not because we benefit from it, but because Christ, living in truth, first loved us. He showed us what it means to love by giving his life for us. In the 13th chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." Our brotherly love is a testimony to the world. It is through this love that people will know we are Christ's disciples. So, how can we live with such an image of love? How can we be witnesses of God's grace in a world that often knows no mercy or true love? The first step is to understand and accept God's love for ourselves. We must believe that we are beloved children of God, redeemed by the blood of Christ. This faith should transform our hearts and motivate us to love others. It is good to accept and love ourselves too, as this is a necessary starting point to then be able to love others. The second step is to practice this love daily. This can mean small gestures of kindness, such as a smile, a word of support, or helping those in need. It can also mean more challenging gestures, such as forgiving someone who has hurt us, or opening up to those who are vastly different from us. The third step is prayer. Let us ask God to fill our hearts with love and give us the strength to love others as He loves us. Prayer is the key to maintaining a living relationship with God. It also develops our emotional intelligence, empathy, and teaches us to recognize God's signposts. Let's also remember that according to the Bible, as stated in the 2nd chapter of the letter to the Ephesians, God's grace is indeed a gift that we receive regardless of our merits. However, true faith should manifest itself in good deeds. James also speaks of this in the 2nd chapter of his letter, saying, "Faith without deeds is dead." Christians are therefore called to live according to Christ's teachings, which is evidence of the authenticity of their faith. Finally, let us remember that we are not alone in our Christian journey. We are part of a community of believers who together can bear witness to God's love. Let us support each other, share our experiences, and learn from one another how to love better. In summary, today's passage from the first letter of Peter reminds us of the central place of Christ in our lives and in our faith. We are redeemed by His blood and called to promote love in faith. May this truth transform our hearts and lead to a deeper understanding and experience of God's grace. May God bless us all